Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. I came to talk today. I think I meant to say the Antisocial Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for taking time out of your day. You could be listening to music. You could be watching TV. You could be reading a book. You could be doing anything. You could even be going to bed early, but you're choosing to listen. So I do appreciate that you are taking the time to tune in, and for the people that are discovering it for the first time, as always, thank you very much for giving it a shot. And usually I say hopefully one of the other episodes will be something that you can get a good gauge of what the podcast is all about, and you can find further enjoyment from it. But I think this episode is certainly a very important one, and a very it's a great episode, and I keep saying it all the time, my best one yet. But this will be a very important and special one moving forward down the track, and I've had a few so far to date, but this is a really good one. So I won't spend too much time explaining a lot of this, and I'll have a few additional words at the end of the episode. But my guest this week is John Maher. John Maher is a keynote speaker. John visits a lot of schools and businesses, and has a message that he tells and conveys to people. And the message is more towards young people, but it's also to parents and to anybody. And it's around road safety. It's around being a responsible driver. And unfortunately for John, he has experienced tragedy in his life, some very extreme circumstances, and something that a lot of people go through on a daily basis across this country in Australia, but all over the world. And his story is it's unique, but it's not in ways. But his particular set of circumstances are very unfortunate. But I guess the positive side of this is that John's been able to use these experiences to form a message and to form a purpose that he gets out there very regularly, and spends a lot of his own time and money to spread this message and hopefully impact a lot of people on the way. And John's been doing this for quite a number of years, and he does make a mention of it, and he wonders and hopes that he's had an impact on a lot of people. And I think it goes without saying that he most certainly has, considering the amount of people that he's been able to speak to over the years. And I discovered John through another podcast, actually, and I was so compelled by his story that I was actually driving home from work quite a number of months ago, and I pulled over and I gave him a call and had a quick chat to him, just introduced myself, and I wanted to help him, and through a few affiliations and channels that I had, to see if there was something that I could do. And we continued to talk over the months, and unfortunately a few of the initial ideas that I had fell through, unfortunately due to a bit of red tape along the way, and having to get other people on board to support, and not in a negative way. It's just unfortunately sometimes these things happen. But I continued to speak with John, and John always kept me up to date with what he was up to, and John sent out some material for me to look at as well. And when this podcast was launched and started to find its feet and gain a bit of traction and momentum, and I could see that more and more people were listening to it, I thought this would be a great opportunity for John to tell his story to the people that listen to this podcast. So take a bit of time. I really encourage you to try and turn off any distractions around you, and really hone in and focus on the story that John tells, and the message that he has and what he's trying to do, because it might not directly, you might not feel that it directly impacts you, but it does. But it also will impact a lot of people around you. So there's a lot of things that I think we all can do to help John to spread his message out there, and I'll touch on it at the end of the podcast as well, because I'm already starting to ramble. but yeah, just listen, and I really hope you get something from it. And I'll put all the links and whatnot at the in the show notes on the website, so you can reach out to John. I really hope you get something out of it and you do enjoy it. Enjoy might not be the best word given the circumstances, but I think there is some enjoyment out of it, because there is a lot of hope. There's a lot of positivity that has come out of something so tragic. And yes, there is a silver lining to this, and it continues to get better with the impact that it has for more and more people out there. So anyway, enough rambling. Hope you enjoy this particular episode with John Maher.
Well, my name is John Maher, and I actually believe that I have the best job in the world, because I'm a keynote speaker, and I speak at a lot of conferences. I also speak at a lot of schools, around about 80 secondary schools a year. And with conferences, my talks vary, because I speak on road safety, I speak on family, and I speak on risk. And I'll go back to yesterday, where I spoke at MacKillop College in Werribee, and I spoke to 300 students on risk, in particular on road safety, because I speak at the Year 10s, 11s and 12 students, and yesterday I had 300 Year 11 students who heard me, and I go back to MacKillop College tomorrow, where I speak to the Year 12 students. And the reason I do that is I can take you on a little bit of a trip back in time, back to when I was 42. I'm a bit older than that now, but I was 42 years old, and I was the manager of an insurance company, a life office in Bendigo, Central Victoria. And I had 34 advisors working for me. We were incredibly successful. I had 4 daughters, Michelle, Katrina, Jasmine and Carmen, and my wife Ange. We lived on a beautiful property just outside of Bendigo, 42 square home on 42 acres, and we were really, really successful. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon where Ange had headed off to church, and I decided to give church. Unfortunately, I missed that morning, and I shouldn't have done that. But instead, I was also the captain coach of a cricket side, and we had won the premiership. So we were having a barbecue that day. We had barbecues set up on Axe Creek, and I said to Ange, you go to church, I'll go out and make sure everything's operating properly at the barbecues for the afternoon, for when we celebrate what we'd achieved. And 5 minutes from home, I was driving into a lovely little town called Axedale, where the barbecues were set up. And as I was going, I was in the 80-kilometre zone, slowing towards 60. I saw a 4-wheel drive coming towards me out of the 60-kilometre zone, and that 4-wheel drive, I noticed it lose control. So I came to a complete stop on the highway, and I sat there. As I watched this 4-wheel drive, I thought it was going across the road in front of me and going to crash into the trees. Instead, it swerved back again. It swerved, and then it rolled, and it rolled twice, and then it bounced up in the air. It bounced so high it went above the roof line of my car, and it then landed upside down on the roof and bonnet of my car. I was knocked unconscious, and as we soon found out, I was really seriously injured. I spent an hour and 50 minutes trapped in the car while people tried to get me out. I can only remember 3 or 4 minutes of the time that I was in the car, because I was going in and out of consciousness all the time. One of the things that I do vividly remember was asking the ambulance driver, how were the people in the other car? And he said to me, the young lady is deceased. And I found out later that the young lady was Emma, who was just 18 years old. She'd gone to sleep at the wheel of her 4-wheel drive at 12 o'clock in the afternoon when she was driving to Sizzlers to go to work, and she crashed into my car and she lost her life, tragically. And I was taken to St John of God's Hospital. I had had 2 operations. When I come out of the operations, I woke up in intensive care. Ange and my 4 girls were all sitting around the bed, and there was machines all around me, pipping and carrying on. And I can tell you I felt lousy. And I looked at Ange and I said, am I going to make it? And Ange said the doctors were really happy with how I'd come through the operations. And then I started, after spending a long time in intensive care and in hospital, I started walking up and down in a hydro pool to try and get my life and my body going again. The injuries that I ended up with was I have a frontal lobe injury, which is a brain injury, obviously, and I have serious short-term memory problems. I have neck and back problems because when the 4-wheel drive landed on the roof, it came down on top of the roof of my car. Luckily for me, the front seats broke and laid me back into the back seat, and the roof was squashed down hard on top of me, and that's why I was trapped in there for so long. But my neck and back, 20 years down the track, I still have physiotherapy on my neck and back every month. My physiotherapist. It's paid for the Traffic Accident Commission in Victoria, and I had leg injuries. I ended up in counselling for 2 years because I really struggled with the fact that an 18-year-old girl had died in my car crash. Even though I knew it wasn't my fault, it was still such a traumatic event that it took me a long time and a lot of help to help me to come to terms with that. One of the things that I was really fortunate with was that, if you can think that you can be fortunate when you're in that situation, was that I was in the insurance industry, and thank heavens I had income protection. And one of the other talks that I give to corporate is the fact that 69% of income earners in Australia do not have income protection, which is a staggering figure. And everybody needs to understand that their most important asset is their ability to earn an income. And within 4 months of me having my car crash, I was under 4 specialists, and they all told me, you will never work again. Thankfully, that is not the case because I'm a keynote speaker. I work for myself. I could never have held a job down. There's no doubt about that. But I've been fortunate that I can actually tell my story. And it was a long, hard road. And people might think, well, gee whiz, you've had some bad luck and these type of things happen to you. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't finished, because 2.5 years after I had my car crash, my beautiful youngest daughter, Carmen, who was 18 years and 3 months, she had to take her best friend into McDonald's because they were both Year 12 students, and they were both Carmens. Well, Carmen Trevine had come out and stayed the night, and the next morning early, my Carmen had to take Carmen Trevine into McDonald's, where she worked part-time of a weekend. She took her in and dropped her off. What we didn't know was the two girls, like kids do, they had talked till 4:30 in the morning in the bedroom, and Carmen was tired. It was a 20-minute drive into Bendigo and 20 minutes back out to our home. And on the way home, Carmen went to sleep at the wheel, and she crashed into a tree at 100 kilometres an hour and was killed instantly. So, and then not long after that, my eldest daughter, Michelle, who was travelling into work that morning, she was the third car on the scene. So life was pretty bad for the Maher family. And, we went through a lot of things, and we had to put a lot of things in place to try and cope with all of this, because the last thing that any family, any dad and mum would ever expect is that they would have to bury their daughter. And that's what we did. So, it was only 2 years after that when 4 young people, students, were killed in Bendigo again in a car crash. One of the boys, the one who was actually driving, I coached his dad at cricket. And when that happened, and I've been watching, because of what happened to Carmen, I had been watching with a great deal of interest the number of young people who were dying on our roads. I'm from Victoria, and just watching these kids do this to themselves and taking risks on the roads. When these 4 boys died in Bendigo, I said, I must do something about this. So I started giving talks at schools on road safety to these students. And the story that I tell is Carmen's story, Andy, as you know. Yep. And I talk about what happened to Carmen. And every single student who listens to Carmen's story, a lot of them will sit there and cry. They will take on board what happened with Carmen. They will understand by listening to me what they will do to their mum and dad, to their brothers and sisters and their best friends should they die on our roads. And they leave my presentation with a renewed respect for the roads, but they also have a renewed respect for themselves. They understand how important they are. I tell these kids, you are the most important person in the world to us. We simply can't lose you, because our lives revolve around them. And they understand they're not just a student. They're not just a child who has low self-esteem or anything like that. They understand how important that they are to us, and builds their confidence. It lets them understand their responsibilities as road users. I also let them know if they're a young person who, because they don't have a licence, they have to get into the passenger seat of a car, that once they sit down in that passenger seat, they literally gift their life to the driver. They have now put their lives 100% in the hands of that driver. And I asked them the question, what have you just done? Who have you just given your most important commodity to? Who now owns your life? What are they going to do with it? How are they going to treat it as a driver? And it is a real wake-up call to these students, because they then understand that when they sit in a car, they now no longer own their life. And I ask every student at every presentation that I give, I say, who has ever been in a car where you felt really unsafe? And I can tell you that 3/4 of the hands go up every single time. Initially, when I was asking that question and seeing so many hands go up, it really shocked me. It now doesn't shock me at all, because these are the lives that our kids are living. Life is different to when I was a young person. And kids do take risks on the roads. They love the speed. We know that a lot of young people are testing out drugs. We know that there's drink driving. We know that there are serious issues on our roads. And I'm telling you, it is not just the young people. No. Older people are doing exactly the same thing with drugs, with drink and with speeding and so on, with risk-taking on our roads. But the people that we must educate are our students. They're in an educatable situation. They're sitting in a classroom, and they are truly our future. And what I see, because I've been doing this for 18 years, this is my very own road safety campaign. I'm not sponsored or supported by anyone. I do this off my own bat. Unfortunately, I have to charge schools for my presentation, but I've been watching what's been going on the roads in Australia. And if I just take Victoria, for instance, where I live, where I have real hands-on with statistics and so on, everybody talks about what a great job that we've done on our roads, because there was a campaign ran in Victoria called Declare War on 1034. Now, that was 20 years ago, when there was 1,034 people killed on the roads. So they ran a campaign. Last year, in 2015, there was 257 people killed on our roads. So the campaign has been incredibly successful, but it has been stagnant at around the 250 to 280 mark for the last 6 to 7 years. And people keep saying, but what a great job we've done. I'm telling you that one death on our roads is one too many. When your child, your husband or your wife or your brother or sister is the person killed on our roads, it is the worst possible situation you can find yourself in, because we can never get over this. And I'm watching it happen all the time. And I can tell you that at the end of January in Victoria, we were 10 deaths down as at the end of January 2015, which was a magnificent result. But we have fought our way back. We are now one death more than at the same time in February 2015. It is just so difficult. And until we can get people to take a real personal responsibility for how they use our roads, for their own actions on the roads, nothing is going to change. And it just seems to me that there is a real apathy, that we have accepted that in Victoria there's going to be 257, there was 257 last year killed. They just accept that there's going to be about 257 killed again. That is not acceptable. No. It is simply not acceptable. And I feel like a voice crying in the wilderness, because there is not enough being done. And I don't have the money to do it, but we all pay our registration fees, and there's money goes to the government and the state governments and so on that should be used more efficiently. We should be much more aware of what's happening and make this personal. This is all personal, because when a person dies, that person, they've lost their life. But the family, what happens to the family is absolutely horrific. Some families break up over it. Marriages break up. It doesn't just happen when you bury this person who was a member of your family. It doesn't just stop there.
Well, you mentioned that with Emma in the first accident, and in your story that I watched and listened to, you made a mention that sometime afterwards the parents of her ended up splitting.
They did.
As a result of what had happened.
They did. And Andy, I thought that I had a feeling of how bad this must be for Emma's family when Emma was killed. But honestly, until Carmen was killed in her car crash, I was so far off the mark, I had truly no idea. I felt incredibly sad for them. I ended up in counselling because of Emma dying in my car crash and how this family must be feeling. But until it happened to us as a family, and until it happens to you as a family, you will never, ever know the impact that this has on you personally and on your family. And I just feel so sad for Michelle, Katrina and Jasmine, who are Carmen's sisters, because I know what they've lost. I know that when we get together for Carmen's birthday, it's 20 years since Carmen died, and these girls still cry for Carmen. I still cry for Carmen because it should never, ever have happened. You can't have your child in your life for 18 years and then all of a sudden close the door and say, okay, I'm getting on with life. It doesn't happen like that. It's such an impact on your life. But we are truly the lucky family in this country because Carmen is still very much part of our life. She is part of my everyday life. Yesterday when I gave the presentation at McKillop College, Carmen was with me and I told all of the kids, Carmen is here with me today. And I thank them for allowing me to speak about Carmen for an hour. That's how much Carmen is in my life. She's in my life more than she is in everyone else in our family's lives. But our grandchildren all know about Carmen. They talk about Carmen openly. She's very much part of our life. I'm very proud of Carmen because I know what she's doing and the impact that her death and her life is having on so many people.
I think just to make a quick comment, I had heard your story previously, and when I did sit down and hear the entire thing and you really go into depth about, I guess, the stages and all the different steps along the way that you've had to go through, and even just on that day when Carmen passed, and you made the mention of having to go through your address book or your phone book and going through from A to Z and calling everybody, and you made a very strong point, and I guess that was a great way of giving some real perspective, especially for younger people, of having to be in that position where you have to repeat something that is you're still coming to terms with so many times to multiple people, and as you said, starting with your family first, but then going through all the friends and all the people that you've got connections with, in the community, and that was something that just, I think that awoken something in me, and that really sort of shot something to home where I could relate to that in the sense that struck a chord, and one of many things that you've made a mention of as well, of course.
Yeah, see, that's just fantastic because that's just such a hard and prolonged an agonising thing to do, to continue to pick up the phone. And you have to pick up the phone because someone is going to hear this secondhand. And I can remember I'd made about 15 phone calls to family and I was on our friends, and the phone rang. I picked the phone up and someone on the end of the phone said to me, John, please tell me it's not true. And I couldn't. And, Carmen had only been killed 20 minutes earlier. And here I am, emotional about that again, because this is so stark and it is so in your face. And then people start turning up and flowers start turning up at your house, and everybody in your house is crying because your 18-year-old daughter is dead. And it is so in your face that this is what, as a country, we cannot let what is happening on our roads continue to happen and accept it. Because if it was a plane that went down in Victoria with 257 people on it, they would investigate this to the last degree. And they talk about the cost of a car crash. And I can't get any financial assistance anywhere. I've tried every avenue. So I have to charge these schools. And I have some schools that say, John, we would love to get you. And mine is a nominal fee, I can tell you. And they say, John, we would love to get you, but honestly, we can't afford $50. They can't even afford $50, some of these government schools. This is Australia, for heaven's sake.
Absolutely.
It is just it's terrible. And the cost, they keep saying, the cost of a major car crash on a highway anywhere in Victoria starts at $500,000. What I say is, let's stop that car crash from happening in the first place. Let's educate everybody. Let's make everyone understand what their responsibility is. Stop taking these risks. And I received an email yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was on a webinar and I talked about this. And an email came in and I nearly replied, and I've actually haven't replied to this email because this person went on about certain things and then he said, and yet the money-grabbing government, state government, booked me 2 months ago for only being 3 kilometres over the speed limit. Now, this person has accepted that he can go 3 kilometres over the speed limit. Now, that's not right. He is not on the same page as where we all should be. And that's why, unfortunately, we have car crashes. And for every person in Victoria, there were 257 killed last year, but there was over 20,000 who ended up seriously injured and in hospitals. And out of those 20,000, 2.5% of those will never leave the hospital that they're in or the institution that they end up in. That is frightening. Yeah, and you know, as I say to the students and to everywhere I speak, I didn't understand for about 12 months that Carmen was actually the lucky one that day because Carmen was dead. She didn't have to face tomorrow the next morning. She didn't lie in bed that night. I was lying beside Ange and I can tell you the bed was shaking and all I could do was put my arm around Ange. And this happens every single day of the week somewhere in Australia. Some family is going to bed that night crying, not being able to sleep because their child or their mum or their dad or their brother or sister is dead. And this must stop. Sometimes it must stop.
It's unfortunate. It's like anything. Usually it gets to a point where things get so bad or become tragic before most people wake up. And a change happens. And not to go off on too much of a tangent, but just to use an example that I can touch on from an experience. I had a very good friend when I was growing up, and a family member of his, an older cousin, threw himself off a major bridge in Brisbane. And this is going back quite a number of years now. But it was only then that the decision was made to put up an extremely high fence to avoid people from even having an attempt to try and get over to throw themselves off the edge. And it is hard because in some ways, in some circumstances, everything costs money. And the money's the last talking point, and I think many people get swept up in the money argument. But there are a lot of things, and I think touching back on to this topic, there are a lot of things that can be done, and a lot of it's just talking to each other and creating that awareness. And I guess part of the reason of reaching out to you again and to do this was, you know, I can only imagine how much of a struggle it can be at times to try and get that message out to more people, and especially when you've got young people that are suffering in these tragedies all the time. And I still get like this every once in a while, and I'm well, I can't even remember my age now, 31. So, but you know, you go through that whole period of feeling like you're invincible. You don't come across any tragedy. You don't come across any experience where your life's flashing before your eyes, and you think that you can do anything that you want. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't get that experience that wakes them up. And the experience that they do have, well, they never register because it ends in their death. And
that's right.
And the example that you said before about asking students how many of them have been in a car where they haven't felt safe. And I would have been one of those people who put up my hand. I can think back of a lot of very, very silly circumstances of, friends in school getting their licenses. And I was one of the last ones in my grade to get the license, and I thought I was quite smart because I could bum a lift off everyone else first. But everyone's excited and they want to test the limits and hoon around and speed and whatnot, and everyone thinks it's great fun. But because no one's experienced anything, and I guess on the other side, there's nobody older either within those circles that had experienced anything as well, where they could turn around and say, you know what, there's a reason why you shouldn't be speeding, and there's a reason why you need to take care of your body and get a decent night's sleep and not start driving around when you've had virtually no sleep. And,
I took risks. I took risks when I was younger. I was young once, and I know what these young people are doing, and I know what they think and how the testosterone works and all of that type of thing. And there are a lot more things that tempt you now than what there was in my day.
Absolutely.
Like, I feel so sorry for the young person today who has to contend with drugs. That is, like, we did have drink, and you'd have drink and cigarettes, and that was it. Now, they have so many things at their fingertips, and what I keep saying to these schools is that I need to talk to these kids, because the most dangerous time for these students is in the holiday period. And I live in Ballarat. Now, there's a forest, Creswick State Forest, and during the holiday period, the police set up roadblocks out there because young kids pinch cars, take them out into the Creswick State Forest and burn them. They've got nothing better to do, and it's idle hands, and they think it's fun, and they get and it's peer pressure and all of those type of things. And everybody must be better educated. It's the only way we can overcome so much is by education.
I wonder, and I don't know whether, because I know that you're obviously very aware of how we track, and you mentioned before about the statistics in Victoria, that you've got a lot of contact with, going through with, and where your impact is as well. Do you see that these circumstances happen a lot more in the rural areas as opposed to in metro areas in larger cities, or is it sort of more of a case it's just everywhere?
It's basically everywhere, and one year they will say, "Oh, there's been more people killed in rural," and then the next year it's back into the city. So it really is a spread, and I don't think that what we do find in rural areas, there's a lot more people are dying through fatigue. In the city, you will find that there are a lot more younger people in particular who are risk-taking with hooning, with street racing.
Yep.
You may have even heard of the one only 3 weeks ago here in Victoria where they believe there were 1,000 people involved in an industrial area doing burnouts and racing and everything. 2 of the cars took off onto the freeway and they were doing 160 kilometres an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning, and one of them went off the top of the E.J. Whitten Bridge and crashed 40 metres below in a fireball. And a 19-year-old boy and his 19-year-old girlfriend were both killed. And that is what gets all of the publicity, and that's where all of the young people get their bad name from. Yeah. And it is not actually the case. No. It's not the case, because I know we try to bring down the numbers of deaths of young people, but there was also in this same period, there were 6 motorbike people killed on motorcycles, and 5 of them were in their 40s. So there's no rhyme nor reason to it. What we have to do is just be so very aware of our responsibilities of road users and how quickly things can go pear-shaped on the roads. Absolutely. A car out of control, I've always said, is the most frightening experience you can ever have. It seems to go faster.
It's definitely an adrenaline choice for a lot of people, and I've got very close friends that ride motorbikes and have done so for a number of years, and a personal preference from my end, it's luckily never interests me, but I can definitely see that you're definitely taking it one step further in a situation like that. And it's like anything, you can do things responsibly, and you can in other ways you can be, sometimes it's not even being legitimately reckless, you're just being ignorant and not being aware of what your actions are. And going back to even the scenario that was mentioned before and is obviously probably the big focus, given your history, is around the fatigue. And
Yes.
that's something that I think a lot of people, when they get into a car,
Yeah.
don't do it in an intentionally reckless way. They just think that they'll be okay.
Correct. Well, one of my big things is fatigue in my presentation because I do a lot of driving. I do about 70,000 kilometres, anywhere between 60 and 70,000 kilometres a year, driving to all of these schools in Victoria. And I get tired when I'm coming home because my presentation is actually mentally quite draining for me. And sometimes I might even have 3 presentations in a day. And I can get in from Melbourne, I live in Ballarat, so I might get about halfway home and I'm getting tired. Now, I pull over immediately and I set my alarm and I have what's called a power nap. And I'm so lucky that I can have that and I go straight to sleep. But I don't just drive off then. I get out of the car and I go for a brisk walk because you must get your adrenaline going again. You must wake yourself up. And if I have to be at a certain place at a certain time and I actually don't have time for a power nap, I will still stop the car and I will run up the road 100 metres and run back again. And I've had people toot at me as I'm doing this. And as I say to the kids, I know exactly what they're thinking. What does this silly old fat bald bloke think he's doing? And what I am doing is making 100% certain that I don't do to what's left of my family what Carmen did to us. Because quite simply, it's too hard. You can't get over it. And one of the other... There was a really high-profile death on Victorian roads last year. A young Cooper Ratton was killed. He was only 16 years old, and his dad is the assistant coach of the Hawthorn Football Club here, and he's coached football for many years. And Cooper played for a country footy side, and he played in the under-18s in the morning. There was a function that night, so they stayed at the footy club. Now, they drank all day, so they were able to get someone to go to the bar and get drink for them. There was 3 of these boys, all underage. They were able to get their hands on drink, as we know kids can, and they drank. During the afternoon, we also find out now that they also took ice. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, the 17-year-old boy decided he'd pinch a brand new Volkswagen that was in the car park. He then travelled at 140 kilometres an hour and rolled it, and young Cooper was killed. Now, I was interviewed on the TV, on the radio the next morning, and everybody was castigating this young driver. Now, he certainly did the wrong thing. But what I try to impress on these students is that you have a choice that you must make. Now, Cooper had a lot of information at his disposal. He knew his mate was only 17. He had a really good idea it wouldn't have been his car. He knew that he'd been drinking with him all day and that they'd taken ice, and yet he chose to get in the car with his mate. Now, the choice you must make is, I am not going to get in that car because this is my life and I will not do this to mum and dad. And he then also should say to his mate, let's not do this. It's as simple as that. We can't take these risks in cars because it always ends up badly. And the other thing that I find, and we all find so often, is it's not always the driver who dies. It's very often the passenger. Very often. And the responses that I'm getting from schools from these students is simply amazing. They are magnificent. The kids of Australia is in great hands. It truly is. You give these young people the right information and they will run with it. They will take notice and they will change their lives if they need changing. And they will become the leaders on our roads. I know that.
It's one thing that you mentioned earlier in the piece about, things that the government could be doing and the amount of money that the government has to spend or it costs when there is a road tragedy.
Yes.
It triggered a thought, and I would love to get your thoughts on it, is as far as the education tool with young people and even touching on the topic of people that get their motorcycle license, and there are a lot of people that get their motorcycle license later on in life as well.
They do.
Do you believe that, it's probably a very obvious question, I probably know the answer to it, but do you believe that there probably should be a lot more focus and education during the testing process of getting your license? So at least from my experience, I got my license in Queensland before I moved to Sydney 10 years ago, and the laws and everything have changed substantially since then, and what a lot of people used to do is I was in more or less Brisbane itself, but a lot of my friends would travel out of town to a rural area and get their license in a quieter place where there was less traffic,
Yes.
and it appeared to be a lot more relaxed and easier to get their
Easier.
license, come back and then deal with heavy traffic, and then obviously crash their car and whatnot. But even for myself, that was in a busier area, the testing process was a lot easier than what it ended up being, or what it is currently, where you had your theory test, but most of the time it was a case of everyone looking over each other's shoulder and getting the answers and comparing notes, and then you would do a couple of driving tests or doing your lessons, but there was no, in Queensland at the time, there was no no quota of hours. You didn't have to log it.
That's right.
It was just a period of time that you had to have your learner license, and then you would go for your driving test. And once you had that, you had your Ps, and you just automatically went from your Ps to your open license after a year or 2 or 3 years or whatever it might have been, without any further examinations.
Correct.
So I know now there's a lot more steps to it, and there's a lot more of a testing phase, but I guess around the awareness and responsible driving and the road safety, I assume that you would probably say that there could be a lot more in that whole process.
Well, I do, and in Victoria, I can talk about Victoria, a learner driver has to do 120 hours. Now, I just wonder how many drivers actually do that 120 hours. And as I say to these students, I said, don't let your mum and dad fudge it. Don't you fudge it. And if you can do 1 million hours, do 1 million hours. You need the experience. But coupled with that, I truly believe there should be education. We should be telling these kids how Carmen lost her life in a car crash and what it does to mum and dad. And I know, and it's been historical, that there's funding given to the police, where the police go around to the schools and the schools don't have to pay, and the police do road safety talks. But then all of a sudden, they decide that they're pulling the funding, and the police don't do any more road safety talks. So the next group of students that are going through, they don't get this education. And I have heard some of the talks of different departments, and I truly question the type of education that these kids are actually getting. I've seen kids being told that this is what the police saw, this is what we saw, this was the injuries, and this was what this person looked like. And you see kids crossing their arms because they do not want to hear that stuff. That is too bland. It's too in their face. It is not going to happen to me. What they need to hear is what you are going to do to your family. You see, once we must stop it happening in the first place. And a student, a young driver, needs to have a reason not to take that risk on the road. And that risk must be so strong that they will not do what peer pressure is perhaps forcing them to do. Or they don't need to look good in the face of their mates. They would be thinking to themselves, I refuse to do this to myself, and therefore I won't be doing it to mum and dad, my brothers and sisters. They need to understand that it is a domino effect. It's kind of what they do.
It's sort of like the cigarette packets, where you've got the very confronting images on the front of the packets.
Yes,
yes. And I know a lot of smokers, and a lot of people would joke and collect all the different images of the packets, and see how many they could get, and make a face out of them and whatnot. And it's funny at the time, but there's a real disconnect, because they don't think it will happen to them. They don't believe it relates to them. They're completely different. They don't know the circumstances around that particular person in the image, and there's nothing that's poking directly at them and saying, this is how it will impact you. This is on a personal level, on an emotional level, this is what will happen to you. And I think a lot of people push hard on the shock value of putting those very confronting images on, and you nailed it on the head with what the police did, because I vaguely remember having a similar thing through when I was in high school, and it was all about shocking us and making us fearful of the carnage, but not really explaining what the long-term impact's going to be, and what that's
Yes.
going to do on a very deep and personal level.
That's right.
We just kept talking about other people all the time.
Yeah, and you know, often young people don't really care much about themselves, but they care about others. And I think that's where the power comes from. And because they do want to look after other people, they do want to make certain that they're going to stay in that person's life. They do love other people. They love their mum and dad, and they don't want to hurt them. And if they do hurt them, it's something they're going to be really not wanting to do a second time. And let's hope, see, Carmen, she only got one chance at having a car crash. Her first car crash, she lost her life. So many people do get a second chance, which is just great. But a lot of people actually don't learn, and that's what the worrying part. So, there's a lot of work to be done. I know that, and I know it's a lot of hard work that needs to be done. But if it's not done, nothing will change. This is what I'm saying. Nothing's changed for so long now that isn't it about time that we put our hands up and say, let's actually change this. Let's see what we can do now. We did bring it down from 1034. Let's see what we can do now. And if we can change, when I drive out of my home really early in the morning to drive for 2.5 hours to speak at a school, I am hopeful that I can change one life. And I am really hopeful, and I will never ever know, that maybe between us, Carmen and I, have saved one life over 18 years. And that's what drives me on.
Oh, no doubt. You would have changed a lot of lives from the amount of people you've spoken to, and just the message itself, I think. Yes. Yeah. It's just even for me, and you know, I'm certainly not a perfect driver, but I get out into the road and I just deal with Sydney traffic every day, and you see a lot of irresponsible driving on a daily basis. But just even from my point of view, and I've been very fortunate because I haven't had a very direct experience with anything that comes close to this, and I've been fortunate in that sense. But I guess now, and probably over the last several months of being aware of your story, and then and as a result, being a lot more aware of what's happening around me and seeing other people on the road, and not just sort of getting angry at bad driving, but really sort of understanding and appreciating that you know, I am safe, and I'm driving a lot more consciously and with a lot more awareness, and then I hope that over time that I'll be able to do things that will pass it on to other people as well. And maybe just off the back of that, and as you said before about making a change and getting that whole statistic moving in the right direction, as it's plateaued at the moment. Have you got any suggestions or a message for anybody who's listening that can do something? And you know, people, it might not be, you know, a monetary thing or anything like that, but is there anything that will help your cause, or at least continue to get the message out there? And obviously talking is a big thing, but is there anything that you feel strongly about that people could do to really continue to push the issue?
Well, there is, because I do corporate, and I get well paid at corporate. I don't get very well paid at schools because they simply don't have the money. And I am concerned at the moment that my poor old car has 254,000 kilometres on the clock, and I simply can't afford to get a new car at the moment. And I'm worried that one day I'm going to be driving to a school in Melbourne. I'm going to let down 300 or 400 students, and that is a real concern to me. But the other thing that everybody needs to do, and I say this everywhere that I go, just impact one more person's life. Tell somebody about how we lost Carmen. Tell someone how easily it happened, and tell them what it has done to our family. That once a person is lost like this, your family can never, ever be the same. It can never be whole again. And if you can impact one other person's life and get them to understand how important they are, and that one person then becomes a much safer driver on our roads, you have done an enormous job. And that's what we need to do. We need to impact other people and ask them to support road safety. And for those people who might have a biro, a pen handy, Carmen has a Facebook page, and Carmen's Facebook page is just absolutely incredible. And it's facebook.com/Carmen Road Safety. And when I give a talk at a school, and I always put statistics up of, when someone dies on the road and things like that, that comes directly from the police. But when I talk at a school, for example, like I did yesterday, I've had 3,000 views that I was at the school in Werribee, and 5 of the students have seen fit to make comments. I've had at one stage when I was in Queensland, spoke at one of the schools in Brisbane, I had 48 comments within 4 hours, all on Carmen's Facebook page.
That's great.
Now, it just makes me feel so proud to think that Carmen has impacted those young people's lives like that they feel so moved that they come on there and tell me that they've gone home and cuddled their mum and dad, because that's part of my presentation, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to people, so what have we missed? What have I lost in losing Carmen? I can't give Carmen a cuddle. And that is the biggest thing. I always loved giving my kids a cuddle. Love it. And we still do it. And my grandkids, as soon as they come in our house, they give me a cuddle. I don't have to go and give them cuddles. They give me a cuddle. And that's what I miss. And I can't tell Carmen how much I love her. And I tell these students, the very second you get home from school today, go straight to your mum and give her the biggest cuddle you have ever given her in your life. And you tell your mum how much you love her, and promise her, make a solemn promise that you will never do to your mum what Carmen has done to Ange. And then the same thing with your dad. You give your dad a cuddle, tell him you will never do to him what Carmen has done to me, because honestly, it is too hard. I miss Carmen so much. And all of these things, it's all avoidable. A car crash is avoidable. If Carmen hadn't have gone to sleep at the wheel, she would be still with us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's it's something, and a lot of these situations at the time just feel like a non-eventful scenario to be in. Jumping into the car when you feel that you're okay enough to be able to get from wherever you are to home or wherever you're going.
Yes.
And I've certainly felt heading home on the evening commute and starting to get the tired eyes and go, oh geez, it's only another 5 minutes up the road, I should be okay. And it is irresponsible, but at the time you don't think anything of it, because you just think, well, you'll be all right, you'll be fine, not a problem at all.
Yeah, that's right.
And
you do.
It's just something that I guess the more that people talk about it, and the more that what you're doing, and I think that I guess the positive out of such a tragedy is that you do have a very impactful message and a very emotive story, and something that can directly touch people straight away. And I guess that's probably the gift out of this situation, is that you're able to do that. And I've got a hell of a lot of respect for what you do, and I can't even begin to imagine all of the things that you and your family have had to go through over the years, and the challenges on a daily basis. And despite all that, and as you said before, a lot of people don't fare well, and whether it be a breakup of a marriage or anything, and even in other cases more tragic events. And I think the fact that you've been able to turn that into a powerful message and go out there to help others, it's an amazing thing to see. So at least from my end, I certainly thank you for doing what you're doing, because it is having an impact on people. And while you definitely want to have more of an impact and continue to push it, what you are doing is definitely remarkable.
Thanks, Andy. And one of the sad things, the really sad thing for me, is when a school contacts me and says, John, we'd really love to bring Carmen's message to our school, but we can't afford it. And that is just so sad. And I'll come down, and I can tell you what my fee is for schools in Victoria. My fee is $800, and I will drive 2.5, 3 hours one way, and the same distance back home again. And my fee is $800, and I speak for an hour. And my presentation, I can tell you that I am speaking in Vancouver, Canada, in June at a big conference over there. And the reason being is my presentation is just so good and so powerful, and I charge schools this nominal fee. And I've had schools where I say to them, look, can you? I drove to Langata, and it was an 11-hour round trip, and my fee was $200. And I did an 11-hour round trip. I decided not to stay overnight in Langata or in Albury-Wodonga because I was going to be losing too much money. And then I get schools who say we simply can't afford you. And it's just so sad to think that it is not impacting the school, it is impacting every single one of those students. And if my fee is $800 and there's 400 students there, that's $2 a head. $2 per student. And we are in Australia, for heaven's sake. We are not a third world country. I have had schools where the students come in and they put a gold coin in a blue bucket beside the door to help pay for my fee. And I can tell you that if the parents were getting this message and they were being the ones asked, would you like your child to hear a road safety message on how we lost Carmen, every single parent would say, yes, please, I'll pay $2.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine how much I would have paid to have Carmen still in my life today?
Absolutely.
Yep. We only get one chance at life, and that's what I say to the kids. You only have one life, one crack.
It's definitely a big perspective change for a lot of people, and it's quite funny because I'm on a bit of a thing at the moment with I'm not sure if you've heard of the act of mindfulness, and they talk about it a lot with meditation, but it's not just associated with meditation. It's just the act of being aware in the moment. And a lot of the time we're in autopilot and we just do things without thinking. And sometimes it's reacting negatively in a situation and not realizing, or we're worrying about something in the future that may not actually eventuate or whatnot. And a big thing's perspective as well, and understanding from another person's point of view, what the situation is. And sometimes when you do get disgruntled or worried about something, or sometimes you're on the opposite, you're very blasé or not very complacent about an issue, and it's when you get the perspective of somebody else that you can truly appreciate and get the true message of whatever is being conveyed at that point in time. Because a lot of people worry too much about themselves. But half the things that they're worrying about themselves are things that aren't actually happening at that point in time. So you might be sitting in front of somebody listening to somebody speak. So for instance, like your message, and you might have somebody who's thinking about 3 or 4 different other things that aren't in that room at that point in time.
Okay.
So it's an interesting thing. I just
it is.
A guest I had on just recently on the podcast, a professor in Melbourne at Monash University, and he studies a lot, and he's got a lot of background in neuroscience as well.
Okay.
And he's made a very big campaign about educating, especially a lot of young people, on mindfulness, and I think it could be a very great tool to have in conjunction with messages like this, where you step into a car and you realize where you are. You don't think about where you're going to be in an hour's time, or you think about where you've just been beforehand and you start to zone out, or you have that extra drink and you think you'll be okay, or you're a little bit tired, but don't worry about it, and you move on.
Yeah.
But having that presence in that moment and realizing what you're doing at that point in time can have a very strong impact on decisions that are made. So it's just a thought that I had, and I think a lot of young people that can learn to slow down, and especially in this day and age with so many distractions out there. And you mentioned drugs, but also things such as your mobile phones and
Yes.
And even things like, social media and all these different things that are bombarding us with information, and we become very disposable. If something doesn't interest us in 10 or 15 seconds, we move on to the next thing.
That's
and
right.
we become very impatient. And I think that also translates into the challenges that young people have when they get into a very heavy motor vehicle, and not understanding the responsibility that they have when they get into a car for themselves, for their family, and for other people on the road as well.
Yeah.
And so it's I once again I really respect what you do, and I hope that at least through this, and it's only a very small thing, but I do get a number of people that listen to it on a weekly basis, and I think a lot of people will take a lot from it, and I hope that it'll just have a bit of a snowball effect where it will just roll to other places and other people, and continue to spread the message, and hopefully it'll lead to some more opportunities for you down the track as well, and I'll certainly do what I can to increase those increase those opportunities for you.
Thanks, Andy. That's great. And by what you've done here today, you've played a role in road safety yourself personally, and the people who are listening to this. You've played a role in bringing more awareness of road safety to all of these people, and I just wish everybody safe driving, because it's up to us. It's all in our hands, and as I said, I'm so proud of what Carmen's message is. In fact, as you know, I've been recognised, or Carmen's been recognised for the message, and I'm not too sure if you knew, but on the 5th of December, I was named Australian of the Day, which was not in 2015, which was pretty cool.
Oh, right.
So. So that's a great recognition of Carmen's message. And 2013, 14 and 15, I was nominated for Australian of the Year. So,
fantastic. Congratulations.
Well, look, it is a great recognition, but I'm just me. It is a recognition of Carmen and her message.
Absolutely.
And it just shows how powerful Carmen's message is. But I would just like to see this country pick up the challenge and take road safety on head first and do something about it. Don't accept what's been going on. We must, someone somewhere must pick this up and run with it. We have, I just don't seem to be getting anywhere. Well, I am. I'm really pleased with what the students are doing. I know that if I impact just one life, it makes a difference, but I think collectively we all have to do something more.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always going to be that strive to impact and have an impact on more people, and as you said, when you look at those totals on a yearly basis and you see that they're not really moving, it's great that they're not increasing and going back in the other direction, but at the same time it's not continuing to improve, and I can only hearing it for me is frustrating to learn of that, but for you, I can't even begin to imagine the frustration that you would have, and that's just one of many emotions that no doubt you would experience by seeing that on a yearly basis. So hopefully we can continue to talk about it, and you never know, we'll just get the right person at the right time in the right place, and who'll be able to make a decision, and we might see an even bigger impact. But as you said, the anytime you can change one person is a dramatic and an amazing thing, and you've certainly done that over quite a number of years.
Yes, the right person might be listening right now, I hope.
I hope so too. Absolutely.
And that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you very much for your time, John. And despite the important message, I know that you are busy, so I do appreciate the time that you've given to chat with me and the people that are listening.
Thanks so much, Andy, and thanks for everyone who's listened. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Hope you got something out of that. As I mentioned at the start, very powerful story and message, and I do hope that you're able to take something away from it and follow through with some of the suggestions that John had, whether it be on a very basic level as far as the interactions with your family and your loved ones, or getting out there and being a little bit more vocal with people around you. You might know some young people that are going through the process of learning to drive now, or may have just got their license recently, or for anybody out there who drives a car. I mean, I think, to be honest, as I'm starting to go off on a bit of a mindfulness soapbox, not rant, but a little spiel that I was throwing out there towards the end, I couldn't help myself, but I definitely found a link between mindfulness and aspects of this message. I do hope that you're able to really sort of push the message out there to more people and be a lot more aware when you do step into a car and those times where we do feel fatigued and tired, that we have a think about it and maybe take that break or have that power nap or quickly run around the car a few times or something like that, regardless of what the passers-by may think of us. It might feel a bit silly or unnecessary at the time, but I think we'd all agree that that's probably a better option than it going the other way. So all the links are in the show notes. I will have links to all John's contact details, websites, the Carmen Road Safety community page on Facebook. I really encourage you guys to like it. John's mentioned there's a few videos on YouTube that he'll send through to me, so I'll have them in the notes, and any other articles that I can find that I'll add in there as well. I really strongly suggest that you reach out to John and shoot him an email, send him some details of what you thought of the episode and what you thought of his story and his message and what he's trying to do, and anything positive that you can send through and encouragement would be fantastic. But more than that, if there is something you can do, then I really, really strongly encourage you to make contact with John. And you might think it's a bit of a silly idea or it might be a bit too over the top, but throw the idea his way, or it might be something that you feel is very small and it might be insignificant, but you'll be very, very surprised with what potentially what might be perceived as an insignificant action might end up being quite significant. So I do encourage you to reach out to John and have a chat to him, and you never know, there might be something that you can do that can have an absolutely dramatic impact, not only in the local area where John's from, near Ballarat, or in the state of Victoria, but nationally across the country, or even for people that are listening from abroad, internationally as well. So I do strongly encourage you to reach out for anybody who is able and willing to do so. And then if you know somebody out there that may be able to benefit from a road safety campaign, somebody, whether it be in the educational system or whether it be in the business, there are always opportunities to demonstrate community involvement. And, it might sound a bit cold, but I guess, business is business, and a lot of businesses out there are thinking about, the survival of the business and selling their service or product and whatnot. But it's also about getting the message out there and getting a bit of marketing and helping out in the community area. So there might be somebody out there, that might be able to align into such a message and will have a positive impact not only for John and his family and the message and the community, but will also have a positive impact for the business as a result of being a part of something that's very important. So brainstorm, guys. See if you can think of something, and any suggestions or opportunities that you may think are out there. Please reach out to him. I know he'll certainly appreciate any contact that comes through, and you might have one idea that might end up becoming more than that. I've got a couple of things that I'm going to try and do with John. We had a quick chat after the end of the episode, so I'll see what I can do, and I'm always trying to talk to more people about John and his message. And look, this podcast was an idea to try and do a little bit more, even though my first couple of attempts didn't quite get there. So I'm hoping that at least this podcast will continue to push in a positive direction for John, and I'll continue to find other ways to continue to help him as well. Just final housekeeping before we wrap up. andysocial.net. You can find me on all the social media platforms that you can probably think of. Just type in Andy Dowling, and you'll find me. And the band stuff's just search for Lord Official. That's probably the easiest way. Otherwise, you'll get confused with God knows what. Excuse the pun. And lord.net.au. And if you want to buy anything, you can use the code word Andy Social. You get 10% off as well. I usually ask you guys to rate and review, and it's always for my selfish intentions, but I do encourage you guys to take the extra couple of minutes to rate and review this episode and the podcast. The reason being is that, and I may have mentioned this before, but I'm a lot more aware of it now, especially after speaking with John, that the more that this podcast gets exposure, and while it's great for me and it's great for my own ego, it has an even better impact on the people who come onto the podcast. From everybody that I've spoken to previously and to John most recently, it creates more awareness. We have more people that tune in and listen to the podcast, hopefully learn something, I should say, not something, and get something from it and continue to listen to it. So by spending a couple of minutes of clicking a few stars and leaving a few words of encouragement or whatnot, it will help propel this podcast up to another level. It will attract more people and will help highlight messages like this and get this message out to more people. So this time around, do it for John. And you might think that's a cheap shot on my behalf, but I really do want to see John's message get out there to more people. So if you feel that you probably can't do anything else that you can think of at this point in time, share the podcast around, click that share button on Facebook, repost the link on your Facebook page, or, put a screenshot up of the podcast on Instagram, get on iTunes, rate it, review it. If you use an alternative player, Stitcher or anything like that, get on there and leave a comment and anything that you're showing some interaction, because like we all know with the internet, if something's not touched and there's no interaction, it dies. It gets forgotten about, and we certainly don't want messages like this to vanish. And so even the smallest things will have an impact if enough of us are all doing it together. So something to keep in mind. But thank you once again for listening, and we'll have another episode next week. And as always, continue to pass the feedback on and reach out to the people that have kindly given their time as well. But thanks again, and we'll speak soon.
You're ready, you're ready, social. You're ready.